Soft music plays. The camera pans across a quiet pub. The man stands beside his son holding a glass of water, looking around. "You know I didn't want to go out that night," my son said. "Come on, Dad. You've been cooped up too long." So I went. Not because I wanted to drink, but because I didn't want him to see how tired I'd become of pretending everything was fine. We walked into that little pub down the street. Nothing fancy. Just the smell of old wood and laughter that didn't belong to me anymore. And then, the bartender came over. She looked at me, really looked at me, the way people do when they recognize something you've forgotten about yourself. She grabbed my hand and said, "You don't look like a man who's lived his best stories yet." I didn't know what to say, but those words hit harder than any whiskey ever could, because she was right. I'd spent years surviving, not living, worrying about bills, about time, about what people thought of me. I'd stopped noticing the small moments, the laughter of my son, the warmth of a sunrise, the sound of rain on the roof. That night, I realized something simple. You don't need to wait for a miracle to start again. Sometimes, all it takes is a stranger, a sentence, and the courage to believe there's still more life left in you. So here's my message to you. If you're still breathing, your story isn't over. Get up, go out, let life surprise you again. Because somewhere out there, someone's waiting to remind you, you were never done living. Camera fades to black. Soft piano outro or the screen fades in. Evening light drifts through half-closed curtains. A man sits alone at a kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee untouched in front of him. The clock ticks louder than it should. Narrow. You ever notice how silence has a weight to it? Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that sits on your chest and makes every breath feel borrowed. That's the kind of silence that filled my house that evening. My son had been calling all week. I kept letting it ring. It's not that I didn't love him. I did, more than anything. But when you start feeling like a ghost in your own story, even love feels like something you're not quite qualified to receive. He finally showed up at the door. No call, no warning. Just stood there, smiling, holding his car keys. "Come on, Dad," he said. "Let's go out. There's this little pub near the lake. You'll like it." I looked at him. My son, a grown man now, and all I could think was how much of his life I'd missed watching him grow into that smile. I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to say I was tired, that the week had been long, that maybe another night would be better. But I'd been saying, maybe another night, for years. He sighs, pushes his chair back. The floorboards creak as he stands. The camera lingers on his hands, trembling slightly as he reaches for his coat. A narrow funny thing about excuses. They always sound reasonable when you whisper them to yourself. So I went. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to see disappointment in his eyes. That's the only thing that still gets to me these days. The look of someone who believes you've still got something left in you when you're not sure you do. The air outside was cold, sharp enough to make me feel awake again. We didn't talk much on the drive. He played some song on the radio, something I didn't recognize, but it had that kind of warmth that makes silence bearable. The camera follows the car headlights cutting through fog. They pass the quiet outlines of houses, a convenience store still open, a man walking his dog under the streetlights. Narrate ORVO. The town hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same neon signs flickering over empty streets. But I had. Or maybe I just stopped fitting into the shape of things around me. When you get older, you start realizing time doesn't move like it used to. It doesn't sprint, it drips. Slowly, consistently. Like a faucet that never shuts off. And one day you wake up, and the sound of that dripping is all you hear. We parked outside the pub. The kind of place that's been around longer than most of its customers. A wooden sign swung gently in the wind, paint faded, but still proud. There was laughter coming from inside. That easy, careless laughter you forget the sound of when life gets too serious. "Come on, Dad," my son said again, his voice softer this time. He didn't have to say more. I could tell this wasn't about a drink. It was about pulling me back into something human. They step inside. The room glows with amber light. Music hums low. People chatting over the sound of glasses clinking. Narrato Arzavio. The warmth hit me first, then the smell, a mix of oak, beer, and something fried. I hadn't been in a place like that in years, not since before his mother passed. For a moment, everything around me blurred. The faces, the noise, the light. And all I could see was her smile across a table like this one, laughing at something I said that wasn't even funny. The memory hit fast and hard, like stepping into sunlight after too long in the dark. "You okay, Dad?" my son asked. I nodded, though my throat was tight. I didn't want him to see the war going on inside my chest. The fight between who I used to be and who I'd become. We found a seat near the corner. The table was carved up with names and initials. Some of them old, some new. There's something beautiful about that. How people leave little marks behind, as if they're afraid of being forgotten. He runs his fingers across the table's surface. The music softens. The bartender, a woman in her late 30s, wipes down the counter and glances over. A Narration. I didn't notice her at first, but when she walked over, there was something familiar in her face. Not that I'd seen her before, but something about her eyes. The kind that have seen too much life to take it for granted. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked. Her voice was calm, steady. The kind of voice that could quiet a storm. I hesitated, because I didn't really know what I wanted. Not from the menu. Not from the night. Not from life, if I'm honest. Just water, I said finally. She smiled. Not the kind of smile people give because they're paid to. The kind that says, "I get it. You're tired, but you showed up anyway." And that's when it hit me. Showing up is half the fight. It's the part no one applauds you for, the part no one sees. But it's where healing begins. He takes a slow sip of water. His son laughs across from him at something small, something ordinary, and for a second the man feels time pause. Feels life again. Narration. That night wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was just a trip to a pub. Something small, something forgettable. But that's the thing about life, the moments that look like nothing often turn into everything. If I'd said no that night, if I'd stayed home like usual, I would have missed the sentence that changed my life. Because later, when that bartender grabbed my hand and said those words, I realized I'd been asleep for years. He looks down at his hand. The same one that'll soon be held by the bartender. A slow fade to black as the music swells softly. Narration. But for now, this was enough. To sit there, to breathe, to feel the hum of life around me again. The reluctant beginning of something I didn't know I needed. A night that would remind me. Sometimes, showing up is the bravest thing a man can do. Screen fades to black. End of segment. The scene opens where we left off, inside the dimly lit pub. Warm light spills from vintage lamps, painting gold over the wooden walls. The low murmur of voices hums in the background. The man sits quietly, water glass half, full, eyes distant. Narration. It's strange how some moments feel small when they happen, and then later when you look back, you realize they were doorways. Thin cracks in the wall of your life, waiting for you to notice the light on the other side. That's what that night was. A doorway I didn't know I was walking through. The bartender moves behind the counter, her rhythm unhurried. She dries glasses, laughs with a couple of regulars, and yet, every now and then, her eyes drift toward the man, studying him, curious but kind. A Narration. I could feel her looking at me, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in that rare way people look when they see you, not just your shape, the kind of look that cuts through the layers, through the polite smiles, the small talk, the tired excuses. My son had gone to greet someone he knew near the jukebox, so it was just me sitting there. Alone again, surrounded by strangers. Funny how you can be in a room full of people and still feel like a ghost walking through the noise. He turns the glass slowly between his fingers, the condensation dripping onto the worn wood of the table. Narration. I started to drift. That's what happens when silence gets too close. Memories sneak in. Her laughter, the way her hand fit mine. The night she told me everything would be all right even when it wasn't. You tell yourself you've moved on, but some ghosts don't haunt houses. They haunt moments like this. The bartender walks over, setting a napkin gently on the table. She glances at his water glass and smiles. "Bardar, you sure you don't want something stronger?" Her tone is light, teasing, but there's warmth beneath it. The kind that makes even refusal sound like a conversation. "Man, no thank you. Water's fine." A pause. She studies him a little longer than most people would. Then quietly, "Bartender, you look like someone who's been carrying more than that glass." He blinks. A small, startled laugh escapes him, but there's truth in her words. She turns to go, but he stops her. That obvious, huh?" Bartender smiling, only to those who've carried their own. As she turns away to serve another table, leaving him sitting there, her words echoing like soft thunder. He watches her move, not with pity, not with flirtation, but with curiosity. Who says something like that to a stranger? Narration. Something about her voice lingered. It wasn't the words, it was the certainty behind them. Like she knew something I didn't. Like she'd already seen the part of my life I was too afraid to look at. A few minutes pass. His son returns, laughing, with 2 drinks in hand. "Son, you should have seen who's here, Dad!" Remember Tom from the hardware store? He still tells that story about you fixing his truck in the rain. The man forces a smile. He nods politely, but his mind's elsewhere. His eyes follow the bartender as she wipes the counter again, humming softly to herself. Narration. It wasn't attraction, not the way people mean it. It was recognition, like finding a sentence you didn't know you'd been trying to finish. Time passes. The music shifts to a softer tune, an old song, one the man recognizes instantly. His son is chatting with someone across the room again. The bartender walks by and notices his expression. Bartender, you know this one? Man, yeah, my wife used to play it on Sunday mornings. She pauses, sensing the crack in his voice. She gone. He nods. Bartender, mine too. Different story, same silence. They share a quiet moment, not heavy, not awkward, just human. Then she reaches out, resting her hand lightly on his for just a second, a gesture of simple empathy. But when she does, she freezes. Her eyes search his face as if something in him surprises her. Bartender, softly. You don't look like a man who's lived his best stories yet. He looks up, confused, as though he didn't hear right. Men, what did you say? Bartender, I said. You've got the look of someone who's waiting for life to end when it's just getting ready to begin again. She smiles, then pulls her hand away, embarrassed by her own boldness. Narration. You ever have someone say something that doesn't make sense at first, but somehow feels like the truth? Like their words reach a part of you didn't even know was still alive. That's what it felt like. Her voice, gentle, certain, sliced through the fog I'd been living in for years. It wasn't pity, it wasn't advice, it was a reminder, a small, unexpected spark. He sits there, stunned. The noise of the bar fades around him. The laughter, the music, all distant now. His focus is entirely on those words, echoing in his head like a heartbeat. Narration. I wanted to say something back, but I didn't know what. What do you say to someone who looks at you and sees not who you are, but who you could be? I just sat there, hand still warm where she'd touched it, realizing how long it had been since anyone believed I still had stories left to live. He glances toward his son, laughing again, alive in a way he used to be. Then back at the bartender, who's returned to her work, as if nothing significant just happened. Narration. And maybe to her, it wasn't. Maybe she said things like that all the time. Words tossed into the world like pebbles on water, never knowing which ones would ripple. But to me, that sentence cracked something open. It made me realize I'd spent years existing, not living. Doing what was expected, wearing the same routines day after day, like armor that kept the world out, but also kept me in. He looks down at his hands, rough, lined with age, but trembling with a new awareness. A narration. I thought about all the things I'd stopped doing. Singing along to the radio, cooking just because it smelled good, laughing without a reason. I'd let grief take up permanent residence inside me, and called it being realistic. But her words, they shook the dust off something old, a part of me that still wanted to feel alive. He stands slowly, glancing toward the counter where she's busy again. He starts to walk over, hesitant, unsure what to say. But before he reaches her, she looks up and meets his eyes. Bartender, smiling. You'll be all right, you know. Some people just need to be reminded. He nods, trying to hide the lump in his throat. She turns back to her work, and he returns to his seat, quieter, but lighter somehow. Narration. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not like a storm, more like the quiet creak of a door opening in a dark room. Sometimes, the most unexpected encounters don't come to change your world. They come to remind you it's still turning. The pub alive with sound and warmth. The man sits beside his son, eyes softer, posture lighter. Outside, rain begins to fall against the windows. Narration. And as I watched the rain slide down the glass, I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe the best stories aren't the ones we've already lived. Maybe they're the ones waiting on the other side of a moment like this. Fade to black, end of scene. Would you like me to write the next 1,000-word section? The moment of reflection, where he leaves the pub, goes home, and truly starts processing what the bartender said. In the same cinematic tone, the screen fades in from black. The sound of gentle rain carries over the empty parking lot outside the pub. Streetlights shimmer in puddles. The man and his son walk toward their car, jackets pulled tight against the drizzle. Narration. It's funny how words can follow you home. You leave them behind in a room, but somehow, they crawl into your chest and refuse to let go. You don't look like a man who's lived his best stories yet. That line, it played in my head like a song on repeat. He opens the car door, but pauses before getting in. His son notices.
Son, you okay, Dad?
The man nods slowly. Man, yeah, just needed some air. His son shrugs, starts the engine, and they drive off through quiet, rain-washed streets. The headlights cast long, trembling reflections on the wet asphalt. Narration. The town looked different that night. Not because anything had changed, but because I was finally seeing it. The neon signs flickering over old stores. The puddles reflecting streetlights like tiny galaxies. Even the sound of tires on wet pavement felt alive somehow. It's strange. How a stranger's words can make the world look new again. He glances at his son beside him, focused on the road, humming softly to the same song from earlier. Naruto the VO. He didn't know what had happened back there. To him, it was just a night out. To me, it was something else. A mirror I didn't know I needed. For years, I'd been walking around half awake, pretending routine was peace, convincing myself that being comfortable was the same as being content. But the truth, comfort can be its own kind of cage. So the car turns down their street. The house appears, modest, quiet, porch light glowing softly through the mist. Son, you sure you're alright, Dad? Man, yeah, son, go ahead inside. I'll be there in a minute. So the son hesitates, then nods and goes in. The man stays by the car, watching the rain fall. He closes his eyes, exhales deeply. Naruto, you ever stand in the rain and not move? Just let it fall on you. It's like the world reminding you that you're still here, still breathing, still part of something. That's what I felt in that moment, a quiet reminder that I wasn't finished yet. He finally walks inside. The house is dim, filled with familiar shadows. He hangs his coat, sits on the edge of the couch. The ticking clock sounds louder than before. Grief has a way of stretching time. Every second feels longer when you've got no one to share it with. But that night, for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt patient, like it was waiting for me to say something. He leans forward, elbows on knees, staring at his hands. A small smile crosses his face, tired but real. Naruto. I thought about her again, the bartender. Not her name, not her face, just her voice, the certainty in it, like she'd seen this version of me before. The man sitting alone, haunted by the could-have-beens. And I wondered, when was the last time I believed in something more than survival? He gets up, walks to the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator fills the stillness. He opens a cupboard, finds an old mug. Chipped, worn. He runs his thumb along the edge. Naruto. This was her favorite mug. She used to drink tea out of it while the sun came through that window. She'd hum, never the full song, just pieces. I used to tease her for not remembering the words. He chuckles softly, the sound fragile but genuine. Naruto RVO. I used to think memories like that were supposed to fade, that letting go meant forgetting. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe remembering is the way we keep loving, even after everything else is gone. He fills the mug with water, heats it, stares out the window. The rain continues to fall, tapping against the glass. Naruto. I thought about what she said. You don't look like a man who's lived his best stories yet. It sounded crazy at first. What stories could I possibly have left? I'd raised my son, I'd worked, I'd lost, I'd endured. Wasn't that it? Wasn't that enough? But then I realized, maybe the best stories aren't about big moments. Maybe they're about rediscovering small ones. The smell of rain, the taste of morning coffee, the way laughter sounds when it's honest. Maybe life isn't waiting for some grand adventure. Maybe it's waiting for us to notice it again. He carries the mug to the living room, sits by the window, and watches lightning flicker in the distance. Naruto RVOAD. I'd spent years hiding from the world, calling it healing. But healing isn't hiding. Healing is standing in the rain again, letting life touch you, even when it stings. He sets the mug down, reaches for an old photo frame on the table. His wife and son smiling at a summer picnic. He traces their faces gently. Naruto. I used to think this photo was a reminder of what I'd lost. But tonight, it looked like a promise. Proof that love existed once, and maybe could again, in different shapes, in unexpected places. He sets the photo down, sits back, exhales. The house seems quieter now, softer. He looks around, not with emptiness but with awareness. Naruto. Maybe that's what she meant, that life doesn't end with loss. It just waits for you to come back to it. He closes his eyes. For the first time in years he smiles without forcing it. Naruto AV. There's something humbling about realizing you've been asleep. It makes you grateful just to wake up. Even if it's late. Even if it hurts. That night, I promised myself something simple. To start small. To say yes to little things again. A walk, a call, a laugh. Because small things, they're how life whispers you back. The rain slows outside. Dawn light begins to sneak into the horizon. The man sips his drink, watching the first hint of sunrise. Naruto. By morning, her words had settled into me. Not as an echo, but as a compass. I didn't have a plan. I didn't need one. All I knew was that I wasn't done yet. He sets the mug aside, stands slowly, walks to the door, and opens it. The air is cool, crisp, full of promise. Birds begin to stir. The street glistens with the memory of rain. Naruto. And as I stepped outside, I realized the world hadn't changed overnight. I had. A little, but enough. Enough to see beauty in the quiet again. Enough to want tomorrow to come. Enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, my best stories were still waiting to be lived. He takes a deep breath, smiles faintly, and begins to walk down the street. The camera pans upward. Sunrise glowing across the sky, the first light of a new beginning. Naruto or Zavio. Sometimes it takes a stranger to remind you. You were never meant to fade quietly. You were meant to begin again. And maybe that's the greatest story of all. Fade to black. The soft sound of a heartbeat merges with the morning wind. End of scene. Would you like me to continue with the next act, The Awakening? So the transformation phase, in the same cinematic, emotional style. That's where the man starts living again, reconnecting with life, his son, and purpose. A full 1,000-word continuation. You said, The Awakening expended and make it lengthy without keynotes 1,000 words. ChatGPT said absolutely. Here's the 1,000-word cinematic continuation of your story, The Awakening. This act follows the moment of reflection and represents the man's turning point. The quiet, deliberate rebirth of his will to live, love, and engage with the world again. It maintains being voiceover tone emotional realism as before. From my son took me to a local pub. The bartender grabbed my hand and said something. The screen fades in from black. Morning light spills through the curtains. The house feels alive in a way it hasn't in years. The hum of the refrigerator, birds outside, faint traffic in the distance. The man sits at the table, a cup of coffee steaming before him. His son walks in, surprised to find him awake early. Son, you're up early. The man smiles faintly, eyes on the sunrise. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd watch the world wake up for once. The son nods, pours himself coffee, and sits down. They share a quiet, comfortable silence. Naruto. It had been years since I'd seen a sunrise without rushing through it. For so long, mornings had felt like just another reminder that life goes on, with or without your permission. But that day it looked different. Not brighter, not louder, just more real. He sips his coffee slowly, eyes reflecting the soft orange glow. The Naruto RVO. Maybe that's what change feels like at first. Not fireworks, not revelation, just the quiet decision to stop letting the day slip by unnoticed. Cut to the man standing outside in the front yard later that morning, holding pruning shears. The overgrown bushes rustle as he starts trimming them. A neighbor across the street waves. And an Igibo morning. Haven't seen you out here in a while. He smiles, nods back. Guess I forgot how to use these things. The neighbor laughs and walks on. The man chuckles softly to himself, shakes his head, and keeps trimming. Each snip of the shears feels like a small act of reclaiming control. Nanararvo. It started small. Cutting the bushes, cleaning the porch. Things I used to tell myself didn't matter. But maybe that's where healing begins. In the small things you choose to care about again. The camera follows him as days begin to pass. Short montage. He cooks breakfast one morning, humming softly. He opens the window to let in sunlight. He laughs at an old photograph. He takes a walk through the park alone, hands in his pockets, watching kids play and dogs run free. Naruto RVO'd for years. I'd been living in grayscale. Now color was seeping back in. Quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. It wasn't that the world had changed, I'd finally stopped waiting for permission to live again. So cut to evening. The man sits at his desk, an old notebook open in front of him. The pages are yellowed and mostly blank. He holds a pen, hesitates, then starts writing. Narrators VO. I hadn't written anything in over a decade. Words used to come easy, stories, letters, notes to her. But when she was gone, the words went with her. He pauses, then writes slowly. It's never too late to begin again. He stares at the sentence for a long moment. Naruto. It wasn't much, just a line. But it was a start, a way of saying I'm still here. The next day, his son finds the notebook open on the table. Son, what's this? Man, just something I've been thinking about. Son, you're writing again. He shrugs, smiling shyly. Man, trying to. Guess I've got some stories left after all. The son grins, pride flickering in his eyes. He pats his father's shoulder before heading out. Naruto. There's something about seeing pride in your child's eyes. It's like a mirror, showing you the parts of yourself that never really broke. Montage continues. Another week passes. He meets an old friend for coffee. He helps his son fix the porch railing. He even goes back to the same pub one quiet afternoon, alone this time. Dow's inside the pub. It's calmer than before. A few regulars, soft music playing. The same bartender is there, cleaning glasses. When she sees him, her face lights up. Bartender, well, look who it is. Didn't think I'd see you back so soon. Man, thought I owed you a thank you. Bartar smiling for what? Man, for that night. For what you said. As she sets the glass down, leans on the counter. Bartardar, I don't even remember what I said. Mayen, something about not having lived my best stories yet. She laughs softly. Bartender sounds like something I'd say. So have you started writing them yet? He smiles, looks down, then meets her eyes again. Mayen. I think I have. A long pause, not romantic, just meaningful. A shared understanding between two people who've both seen loss and decided to live anyway. And Bardar, good. Don't stop now. Most people give up halfway through the best part. He nods. The camera holds on his face, peaceful, lighter than before. Narrato. I didn't realize until then that she hadn't just given me words. She'd given me permission. To breathe, to rebuild. To be something more than what I'd lost. Kate, the man walking home. Evening sun glowing through trees. The wind carries the faint scent of rain. He stops on a bridge overlooking the water. A narrator VO. I used to think awakening meant some grand revelation. But it's quieter than that. It's the sound of your own heartbeat returning. It's laughter you didn't have to force. It's a morning that feels like a beginning instead of an echo. He watches ducks glide across the water, a couple holding hands nearby. He smiles to himself. Narao VO. I don't know how long this peace will last. Maybe it's temporary. Maybe tomorrow will hurt again. But that's alright. Because now I know I can start over. As many times as it takes. A night falls. He returns home, sits on the porch with his son. They share a beer. His first in years. They clink bottles lightly. Son, you seem different, Dad. Man's smiling. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just finally me again. The son leans back, satisfied. The man looks up at the stars. Soft glow above quiet streets. Narado Waro. I used to look at the night sky and see distance. Now I see space. Room for dreams I thought I'd outgrown. The bartender was right. I hadn't lived my best stories yet. But I'm living them now. In every sunrise, in every laugh, in every moment I choose to stay open. He stands, walks down the steps, barefoot on cool grass. The wind rustles through the trees. Narar Asam, this is what awakening feels like. Not a thunderclap, not a miracle. Just the steady return of hope. The quiet knowing that even after all the loss, life still wants you. He closes his eyes, lets the wind brush across his face. A soft smile forms. Naro. And maybe that's the greatest story I'll ever tell. The one where I finally came home to myself. The camera pans up, stars stretching across the night sky. Gentle piano music swells. Fade to black. Narado VO. Because in the end, awakening isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've been all along. And having the courage to live it. Would you like me to write the final act, the call to action? Next, where he turns his personal awakening into a message for others, like the speech coming full circle. It would close the story in a powerful, emotional $1 final. You said, the call to action, expend it and make it lengthy without keynotes, 1,000 words, ChatGPT said, of course. Here is the final act, the 1,000 word cinematic conclusion of your story, the call to action. It completes the emotional arc of my son took me to a local pub. The bartender grabbed my hand and said something shocking, turning the man's private awakening into a universal message. The tone remains reflective and somatic, like the closing voiceover of a heartfelt fun. Taos Kal from my son took me to a local pub. The bartender grabbed my hand and said something shocking. As the screen opens on a slow sunrise, dew glistens on the grass. The man stands at the edge of a quiet lake, the same one near the pub. He's older, steadier now, a man at peace with the passing of time. The camera lingers on the ripples of water as he skips a stone across the surface. Narata VO. There's something sacred about mornings, not because they promise anything extraordinary, but because they whisper you still have time. Time to try again. Time to forgive. Time to live. He takes a slow breath, the cool air filling his lungs. Behind him his son walks up holding 2 cups of coffee. Son, I figured you'd be out here. Man smiling, old habits. The son hands him a cup. They stand side by side, watching the light spread across the water. Narada RVO. It's strange how simple life looks once you stop fighting it. I spent years searching for meaning. In work, in loss, in what used to be. But maybe meaning was never lost. Maybe it was waiting for me to slow down long enough to notice it. The man turns to his son and man. You know, I used to think growing old meant watching the world move on without you. Now I think it just means you finally understand how precious it is. His son nods, quiet, thoughtful. They sip their coffee in silence. Naruto or VO. I've come to believe that life doesn't ask for much. It doesn't need us to be extraordinary. It just needs us to be awake. To stop living on autopilot. To stop letting days blur into years. He sets the cup down, crouches near the water, and dips his fingers into it. The reflection of the sun glimmers across his hand. Nara-Aratho. That bartender's words still echo sometimes. You don't look like a man who's lived his best stories yet. At the time, I thought she was mistaken. But now, I understand. Your best stories aren't about fame or fortune. They're not about being remembered. They're about being present, about showing up for the people who love you, and for the version of yourself that's still waiting to be discovered. Cut to the man speaking at a small community center. A modest group of people sits in folding chairs. Older men, women, even a few young faces. He stands at the front, nervous at first, but calm. And addressing the group, I wasn't planning to talk tonight, but my son said I should share something about what got me out of bed again. I don't have advice, I just have a story. He pauses, looks around the room. Man, a few months ago, I went to a local pub with my son. I was tired, not just in body but in spirit. You know, the kind of tired that sleep can't fix. Anyway, a bartender there said something I'll never forget. She told me I didn't look like a man who'd lived his best stories yet. At first, I thought it was just a kind thing to say to an old stranger. But it stuck with me. And I realized she was right. The audience listens, some nodding quietly. The man's voice steadies, meaning I'd spent so much time remembering the life I lost. I forgot to live the one I still had. I forgot that grief doesn't have to mean goodbye. Sometimes it just means learning to carry love differently. A brief silence. He smiles softly. Man, so I started small. I cooked breakfast again. I wrote again. I even laughed again. And slowly, the world started to look a little less gray. That's all it takes. One small choice, repeated every day, to believe that life's not done with you yet. Applause doesn't come, not because they're unmoved, but because they're still processing. Some wipe their eyes. The man nods, sits down. His son, in the back, smiles proudly. Narration. That night, as I walked home, I realized the truth about second chances. They don't come from miracles. They come from moments. Ordinary moments that dare you to begin again. Montage begins. The man volunteering at a local shelter, teaching a younger man how to fix an engine, walking in the rain without rushing to get inside. Each image slow, warm, tender. Panarato vo. I used to think I had nothing left to give. But life has a way of proving you wrong, if you're brave enough to listen. Sometimes, purpose doesn't find you in a grand revelation. It finds you in someone's quiet thank you. In your child's laughter. In the peace of watching the world turn, knowing you're still part of it. He stops one evening at the same pub. The bartender is closing up. She looks up and smiles. Abada, are you again?
Mayan, yeah.
Thought I'd stop by, tell you that you were right. She raises an eyebrow. Kabandar, about what? Mayan, about me. I hadn't lived my best stories, but I'm working on them. She smiles, nods approvingly. A bartender, then keep going. Life's still pouring, you just needed a refill. They laugh quietly. He tips his head, walks out into the cool night air. Anararvro. I used to think stories ended with closure. But now I think they end when you stop turning the page. And I'm not done reading mine yet. Cut. The man and his son walking along a pier at sunset. The sky burns with color, gold, rose, violet. They stop at the edge, leaning on the railing. Saw you ever think about what's next? The man smiles faintly, eyes on the horizon every day. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. Pause. The wind carries their quiet laughter. Fear used to rule me. Fear of endings. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of waking up to nothing new. But fear loses its voice when you start living with intention. When you decide that each morning, no matter how ordinary, is still a chance to build something beautiful. The camera pans upward. Gulls fly across the sky, their reflections gliding over water. Narratio avod. If you're listening to this, wherever you are, whoever you are, this is what I want you to know. You are not finished. You are not too late. You are not the mistakes you made, or the years you think you wasted. There's more waiting for you. More laughter, more love, more beginnings. But you have to meet life halfway. You have to step outside even if it's raining. You have to answer when the world whispers, "Come back to me." So he looks directly into the camera, steady, kind, human, and softly. Because someday, someone's gonna grab your hand, maybe a stranger, maybe a friend, and remind you that your best stories aren't behind you. They're right in front of you. He exhales, eyes glimmering with quiet strength. Narada vomide. When that moment comes, I hope you listen. I hope you don't turn away. I hope you remember. You don't need to wait for a miracle. You are the miracle. Life isn't asking you to be fearless. It's asking you to keep walking, even when the path looks uncertain, even when the rain won't stop. Because somewhere ahead, someone's waiting to remind you who you really are. And when they do, you'll smile, take a breath, and whisper back, "I remember now. This was never just my story, it's yours too. And it's only just beginning."